Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Most people see Harry Potter as a children's fairy tale that gradually turns darker toward the end. And indeed, an entire generation grew up with that boy walking alongside him through magic, friendship and loss. But when we reread the books as adults, J.K. Rowling's world takes on a completely different meaning. Beneath the glitter of spells lies something far more unsettling, moral dilemmas, hidden illusions and scenes no one dares to discuss. Today, dark truths you may never have noticed before. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Hogwarts, the most dangerous school in the world. Every child dreamed of receiving that letter from Hogwarts, but from a parent's point of view, this castle looks more like a death trap than a school. Giant spiders, a basilisk, werewolves, ghosts, dark artifacts, all of this coexists under one roof with children. Quidditch? A sport where you can fall from a 20-meter height or be smashed by an iron ball. Moaning Myrtle and Cedric Diggory are just the best-known casualties. How many other stories were quietly covered up? Number 2. The Marauder's Map, a surveillance device. At first glance, it's just a fun artifact created by mischievous students. But think about it. The map tracks every person inside the castle, showing exactly where they are and who they're with. What if such an object falls into the wrong hands? It's no longer a prank, it's a tool of surveillance, violation of privacy, and manipulation. A curious detail: in the Prisoner of Azkaban film credits, 2 pairs of footprints stand a little too close. Coincidence? Number 3. Love potions, the magical equivalent of assault. The wizarding world of Rowling is filled with contradictions. Some spells, like the Imperious Curse, are unforgivable, while others, like love potions that equally suppress free will, are sold freely to students. The story of Merope Gaunt, Voldemort's mother, is horrifying. She enchanted a man, forcing him to love her against his will. What is that, if not assault disguised as affection? And it's no coincidence that from this union was born one who lacked all compassion. Number 4. Dolores Umbridge and the Centaurs. The scene no one talks about. Many hate Umbridge, perhaps even more than Voldemort himself. But her punishment in the book raises disturbing questions. The Centaurs drag her deep into the Forbidden Forest. The films skip over this, but the text contains ominous hints. Umbridge returns broken, traumatized, and terrified. Centaurs in mythology are far from harmless. Many fans suspect that something happened in that forest that no one dares to name aloud. Number 5. The Dursleys. Victims of a Horcrux? Yes, they were cruel to Harry, but what if the truth is more complex? Horcruxes radiate dark energy, corrupting the souls of those nearby. And Harry was himself a Horcrux. He lived under the same roof with the Dursleys for 10 years. Could that have poisoned their hearts, turning them bitter, paranoid, and hateful? Number 6. Slytherin, not evil, but a reflection of society. Since the founding of Hogwarts, Slytherins have been branded as dangerous and ambitious. But let's be honest, is ambition really a crime? The other 3 houses have long defined themselves in opposition to Slytherin, creating centuries of prejudice. Eventually, the students labelled as bad simply began living up to the label. Perhaps Slytherin isn't dark at all, merely misunderstood. Number 7. The Wizarding World, built on lies. At first glance, the magical world seems ideal, a ministry, order, justice. But look closer. Deception runs through everything. Fake galleons, polyjuice potion, the trace on underage wizards, all tools easily twisted for control and deceit. Power here is no purer than in the Muggle world. It's just wrapped in the glittering veil of enchantment. Number 8. The Ministry of Magic, bureaucracy over justice. The Ministry of Magic, at first glance, seems like an orderly government, a place where adults keep chaos under control. But when you look closer, it's not protection, it's power. The Ministry doesn't seek justice, it seeks silence. When Harry is dragged before the Wizengamot for using a simple Patronus charm to save his own life, the scene feels absurd and terrifying. You are charged with knowingly and willfully using magic before a muggle, Fudge declares, as if addressing a criminal, not a child. The entire trial is a performance. Evidence twisted, laws bent, truth ignored. What matters is not right or wrong, but obedience. The more we see of the Ministry, the clearer its hypocrisy becomes. Cornelius Fudge refuses to believe Voldemort has returned, not because he doubts it, but because the truth threatens his control. Dolores Umbridge turns Hogwarts into a miniature version of the Ministry, full of decrees, punishments, and pink lies. The world of wizards mirrors our own too well. Propaganda replaces reason, paperwork replaces justice, and fear keeps everyone in line. Behind the golden doors and enchanted elevators lies the same truth as in any corrupt system. It's not dark magic that rules, but bureaucracy. Number 9, Albus Dumbledore, wise mentor or master manipulator. Albus Dumbledore is often remembered as the wise old mentor, calm, kind, and all-knowing. But as we grow older, that image begins to crack. His wisdom hides a ruthless clarity. He didn't just teach students, he directed lives. From the moment he left Harry at the Dursleys' doorstep, he was setting the stage for a story he already understood the ending of. He knew that the boy he protected was also marked for death, yet he said nothing. "You have been raising him like a pig for slaughter," Snape accused, and Dumbledore didn't deny it. Dumbledore saw people as pieces on a vast chessboard, and he was always the one moving them. He trusted Snape, used him, and still kept secrets from him. He guided Harry just enough to survive, but never enough to see the full truth. Even his death was part of the plan, a calculated act meant to protect Draco and maintain trust with Voldemort's followers. It's brilliant strategy, yes, but it's also chilling. The man who taught about love and sacrifice was willing to orchestrate both. And yet that's what makes him fascinating. Dumbledore's greatest strength in his intelligence was also his flaw. He once told Harry, "Do not pity the dead, pity the living." But perhaps it's Dumbledore who deserves pity most. A man who understood love but believed logic mattered more, who carried guilt for his sister's death and tried to redeem himself through control. He won the war long before the final battle, but at the cost of his own humanity. Number 10, Peter Pettigrew, the fear that lives in us all. Peter Pettigrew is one of the most despised characters in the entire saga. The man who betrayed James and Lily Potter, sending them to their deaths. At first glance, he seems weak, pathetic, even disgusting. But that's exactly what makes him terrifying. He's not a monster like Voldemort or a hero like Sirius. He's ordinary. When cornered in The Prisoner of Azkaban, he cries, "You don't understand, he would have killed me." And in that desperate plea we see what he truly represents. The fear of death, the instinct to survive no matter the cost. Pettigrew didn't betray out of hatred, he did it out of terror. He lived his entire life hiding, first as a rat named Scabbers, then as a servant grovelling at Voldemort's feet. When Harry spares his life, that mercy becomes Peter's punishment. The silver hand Voldemort gives him later, meant as a reward, becomes his executioner. When Pettigrew hesitates to kill Harry in the Malfoy Manor dungeon, his own hand tightens around his throat, choking him to death. his fear wins one last time, silencing even his brief flicker of remorse. In Peter's story lies an uncomfortable truth. Not everyone can be brave. Not everyone chooses honor over fear. He is the part of humanity we try not to see, the quiet terror that whispers, "Save yourself." Pettigrew reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it, and that's why his death feels so haunting. It isn't just the end of a coward, it's the mirror of every moment we wonder whether we'd have done better. Number 11. House elves. The slavery no one wants to discuss. At first, Dobby seems like comic relief. A small creature with big eyes and a nervous habit of hitting himself. Children laugh at his quirks, but adults see something else, a slave begging for dignity. When Dobby first appears in the Chamber of Secrets, he punishes himself for speaking the truth. "Dobby must punish himself, sir," he says, slamming his head against the wall. It's not magic making him do it. It's centuries of conditioning, a creature so broken by servitude that freedom feels like a crime. House elves are born into bondage. They serve wizarding families for generations, binding their lives to their masters. The Malfoys treat Dobby as property, and when he's freed, it's through a loophole, a sock hidden in a book. That tiny piece of clothing becomes a symbol of rebellion, as powerful as any spell. Yet, even after his freedom, Dobby still calls Harry Sir. It's heartbreaking, a reminder that breaking chains doesn't instantly heal the mind that's been bound. Hermione Granger sees what others ignore. Her campaign, SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, is mocked by everyone, even Ron and Harry. "They like being enslaved," Ron says, echoing a cruel truth of any oppressive system. When abuse becomes normal, liberation feels wrong. Hermione's fight exposes the hypocrisy of the wizarding world, a society that condemns dark magic, but quietly accepts slavery as tradition. When Dobby dies, saving Harry and his friends at Malfoy Manor, it's one of the most human moments in the series. Here lies Dobby, a free elf, reads the stone on his grave. He dies not as a servant, but as a friend. And in that moment, J.K. Rowling's story stops being about magic altogether. It becomes a mirror, showing how, even in a world of wonders, freedom remains the rarest spell of all. Number 12. Death as a companion to growing up. Death follows Harry from the very beginning. It takes his parents before he can even remember them. It waits for him in the Chamber of Secrets, in the graveyard, in the Forbidden Forest. As children, we see these moments as thrilling, battles of good versus evil, but as adults we see something else, a story about learning to live with loss. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure, Dumbledore once said. Only later do we understand what he meant when that growing up means learning to face the things we cannot escape. Every death in Harry's life shapes him. Cedric Diggory's murder in the graveyard shatters his innocence. Sirius Black's death rips away the last piece of family he ever had. And Dumbledore's fall from the astronomy tower marks the end of Harry's youth, the moment he realizes that no one else will protect him anymore. Each loss pulls him closer to the truth. Love and pain are inseparable. To care deeply means to risk breaking. When Snape dies, the truth of sacrifice becomes unbearable. Harry learns that the man he hated had protected him all along out of love for his mother. It's a cruel lesson, that we often understand people only when it's too late. The same truth echoes through the entire saga. Even victory demands grief. The final battle at Hogwarts isn't just about defeating Voldemort. It's about everyone who won't live to see the morning. By the end, Harry does what no child should ever have to do. He walks willingly toward death. He accepts it, not as an ending, but as part of life. That is the true magic of this story. It's not about defeating monsters, but about finding light even when surrounded by darkness. Growing up in Rowling's world means learning that death is not the opposite of life. It's what gives it meaning. Number 13. Severus Snape, a hero or a man destroyed by love? When we first meet Professor Snape, he seems cruel, cold, and endlessly unfair to Harry. He mocks him in class, humiliates him in front of others, and shows open hatred toward the boy. But as the story unfolds, a darker truth emerges. Snape's anger isn't hatred, it's pain. Every glance at Harry reminds him of Lily Potter, the only person he ever loved, and of James, the man who took her away. That boy's green eyes were a living ghost, haunting him every single day he stepped into that classroom. Snape's life was defined by one mistake: joining Voldemort. He did it out of pride, hunger for belonging, and ignorance of what that choice truly meant. When Voldemort killed Lily, Snape's world shattered. After all this time? Dumbledore once asked him. Always, Snape answered, a single word that carried years of guilt and devotion. From that moment, he lived not for redemption, but for punishment. Every act of courage he made afterward was born not from heroism, but from unbearable remorse. As a double agent, Snape walked a knife's edge between two worlds. To the Death Eaters he was loyal, to the Order he was distrusted. He lied to everyone, including himself, and carried secrets that poisoned him from within. When he saved Harry's life, it wasn't out of affection. It was his final promise to Lily. Even Dumbledore used his grief as a weapon, asking him to protect the very child that symbolized all he had lost. In the end, Snape died as he lived, misunderstood. His last moments were not grand or glorious. He looked at Harry and whispered, "Look at me," wanting perhaps to see Lily's eyes one last time. Hero or not, Snape's story is a reminder that love, when mixed with guilt and loss, can destroy as completely as hate. He was not a perfect man. He was simply a broken one who kept his promise even when it cost him everything. Number 14. Voldemort and the Fear of Death, a mirror of human nature. Voldemort was never born a monster. He became one in his desperate fight against the one enemy no magic could defeat, death itself. As Tom Riddle, he feared the end more than anything else. That fear grew into an obsession that consumed his soul. "There is nothing worse than death," he once told Dumbledore. But Dumbledore's quiet reply, "You are quite wrong," reveals the truth. Voldemort's evil was not born of hatred, but of fear. He split his soul 7 times, turning life into fragments just to delay the inevitable. Each Horcrux, from the diary to Nagini, was a piece of his humanity cut away. The act of murder was only a means to an end. In trying to escape death, he became something worse than dead, hollow. The boy who once roamed the orphanage halls vanished, replaced by a shadow obsessed with surviving at any cost. Voldemort's fear stands in stark contrast to Harry's acceptance. When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest in the Deathly Hallows, he faces death unarmed. "I'm about to die," he thinks, and yet he feels calm. That moment separates the two forever. Harry's strength comes not from power, but from peace, from the understanding that life has meaning only because it ends. Voldemort, who saw death as weakness, never understood that truth. In the end, his downfall was not a curse or a prophecy, but the very thing he ran from. When his final spell rebounds, he dies as he lived, alone, terrified, and clinging to life that no longer belonged to him. Voldemort's story is a mirror held up to our own fear of death. It asks one question that lingers long after the last page. What are we willing to lose trying to live forever? Number 15, the unforgivable curse and the loss of innocence. There is a moment in the Harry Potter series that rarely reveals its full weight until one revisits it as an adult. The spell itself, Crucio, burns through the air not with physical fire, but with something far worse, the agony of intent. For a child reading these books, the word might seem like another piece of fantasy vocabulary, a weapon used by villains, distant and theatrical. Yet for an adult, the realization strikes deeper. The unforgivable curses are not just forbidden because of their power, they are forbidden because of what they demand from the one who casts them. They require hatred, vengeance, the conscious decision to cause suffering. And that is the line Harry crosses in a moment of rage and pain, long after the laughter of the Great Hall and the innocence of friendship have started to fade. When Bellatrix Lestrange kills Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries, the scene is painted in flashes of shock, a curse, a shimmer of green, and the godfather who had just laughed disappears behind a veil. To younger readers, it is a tragedy. To older ones, it becomes a psychological wound that shapes everything after. In that instant, the boy who lived loses not just his last link to family, but the fragile idea that justice can ever be clean. It is no coincidence that the same woman who kills Sirius becomes the target of Harry's most dangerous impulse, the desire to hurt her back. Revenge, even in the wizarding world, is the language of the adult, not the child. When Harry confronts Bellatrix moments later, his world narrows into something animal and uncontrollable. The book tells us that rage and grief filled him to the bursting point. His wand moves almost instinctively, but the thought behind it is human, too human. "Crucio!" Harry roared. The spell, forbidden by every law of magic, leaves his mouth with the same ease as a schoolboy's charm. It is not perfect. Bellatrix only falls to her knees, shrieking in surprise rather than true agony. She mocks him for it. "You need to mean them, Potter. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long." For the first time, we learn that cruelty itself is part of the spell's mechanism. Pain cannot be summoned without intention. To torture, one must want to torture. That revelation transforms Harry's world. It is not a duel of wands anymore. It is a duel of morality. The teenage boy, who once used spells to summon chocolate frogs or levitate feathers, is now learning that power without hatred is incomplete in this new war. He feels the weight of his failure, not because the spell failed to hurt Bellatrix, but because, for a brief moment, he wanted it to succeed. That single spark of desire to make her suffer as she made him suffer is the true curse. Adults reading the passage recognize this moment as the quiet death of childhood. It is easy to forget that Harry's education at Hogwarts is filled with casual proximity to death. From his first year, he faces trolls, basilisks, dementors, and dark wizards. The teachers prepare their students for exams, yes, but also for survival. Professor Lupin teaches them to fight boggarts, manifestations of fear. Professor Moody, or rather Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, introduces them to the unforgivable curses themselves. He casts them in front of terrified students, the Imperius, the Cruciatus, and the Killing Curse. Avada Kedavra, Moody says, and a spider collapses lifelessly. The students gasp, but no one stops the lesson. In that classroom, under flickering torchlight, a generation learns that killing is not just history, it is curriculum. What stands out now, upon rereading, is how normalized violence becomes within the magical world. The children of Hogwarts are shaped by a system that dresses brutality in the robes of education. They duel in corridors, cast jinxes for amusement, and later use defensive spells to protect their lives. What begins as Expelliarmus, a disarming charm shouted in jest during club meetings, evolves into a survival instinct shouted across battlefields. When Harry later refuses to use Avada Kedavra, it is not just heroism, it is rebellion against the very environment that raised him to see death as routine. Harry's use of the Cruciatus curse against Bellatrix is not the only time he crosses this border. Later in The Half-Blood Prince, after Draco Malfoy attacks him with the Sectum Sempra curse, Harry retaliates instinctively, almost repeating history in reverse. The spell, an invention of the young Severus Snape, slices Draco open, leaving blood pouring across the tiled floor. Horror overtakes Harry when he realizes what he's done. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest, as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. The violence, sudden and uncontrolled, mirrors the very forces Harry has sworn to fight. Again, he is a boy who meant only to defend himself, but magic does not recognize innocence, only intent and result. Snape's arrival to heal Draco transforms the scene into a moral reckoning. The same man who once nearly killed Harry's father now saves his rival's son. It's a cruel symmetry. Snape's anger, cold, silent, and deeply personal, reminds Harry that every spell carries consequence. "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter," he says, and the words strike harder than any curse. What Harry learns in that moment is that vengeance, even accidental, leaves a residue. It stains both the victim and the perpetrator. From this point onward, Harry's magic becomes heavier, more deliberate. He begins to understand what Dumbledore meant when he said that love was his greatest power. Not magic, not strength, but mercy. Number 16, The Ghosts of Hogwarts. Living Memories of Pain. In the enchanted halls of Hogwarts, the ghosts drift through stone corridors like echoes of forgotten sorrows. To a child reading Harry Potter for the first time, they seem like charming additions to the magical world, a humorous touch to balance the darker tones of the story. Nearly Headless Nick, with his clumsy attempts to join the Headless Hunt, the Fat Friar's cheerful benevolence, or the Grey Lady's quiet grace, all appear as fanciful figures from a fairy tale. Yet when one revisits the series as an adult, the illusion of whimsy fades. The ghosts of Hogwarts are not symbols of comfort but of pain. They are reminders that magic cannot heal every wound, and that some souls remain trapped, unable to move on. Nearly Headless Nick, whose real name is Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, once served as a wizard in the royal court. In life he was a man of pride, and in death a man of embarrassment. His head, nearly severed by a dull axe, hangs by a sinew of flesh, a grotesque mockery of execution and failure. What once seemed comical now feels tragic. His longing to join the Headless Hunt, led by the fully decapitated Sir Patrick, is not a matter of vanity, but of belonging. Nick's ghostly existence is a life of rejection, a constant reminder of imperfection and disgrace. The moment when he turns away from the crowd during the Halloween feast, humiliated yet again, reflects a deep loneliness that no spell could ease. The Fat Friar, the jovial ghost of Hufflepuff House, at first glance represents kindness and forgiveness. He greets new students with warmth, offering laughter instead of fear. But even his story holds a wound. He was executed by the very church he served, condemned for using magic to heal the sick, a sin in the eyes of men who feared what they could not understand. His optimism becomes a mask, a fragile protection against the injustice of his death. In rereading his tale, one sees the quiet defiance of a man who continues to care, even when the world betrayed him. He floats through the halls of Hogwarts as a symbol of compassion, but his laughter echoes with melancholy. And then there is the Grey Lady, Helena Ravenclaw, daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw herself. As children, we see her as a silent, ethereal figure, haunting the corridors with an air of mystery. Only later do we grasp the tragedy that binds her spirit to the castle. Driven by pride and jealousy, Helena stole her mother's diadem, the legendary artifact said to enhance wisdom, and fled across the sea. Rowena, dying of heartbreak, sent a man to find her daughter, the Bloody Baron. But when Helena refused to return, he killed her in a fit of rage. Horrified by what he had done, the Baron took his own life. Both returned as ghosts, forever chained to the place that held their greatest sins. The story of Helena and the Baron is one of obsession and guilt, more haunting than any spell. "I was careless," Helena once confesses to Harry, her words heavy with centuries of regret. "I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother. I ran away with her diadem." What once seemed a mere side tale becomes, in adulthood, a meditation on human frailty, on how love can twist into possession, and how remorse can last longer than life itself. The diadem, later turned into a Horcrux by Voldemort, becomes a physical manifestation of the very corruption that destroyed Helena and the Baron, the refusal to let go. The Bloody Baron, his robes stained with the spectral image of blood, represents the other side of this tragedy, the torment of an unrepentant soul. In the Great Hall, he floats apart from the other ghosts, silent and grim. Students whisper about his cruelty, but none truly understand him. In truth, he is a man punished not by others, but by his own conscience. His eternal penance is not demanded by any god or spell, it is self-inflicted. His love for Helena became his curse, and the castle, his prison. In the stillness of Hogwarts nights, one can imagine the Baron's silent sorrow echoing through the stones, as though the castle itself remembers his sin. When Harry meets the ghosts, he encounters not only the remnants of the past, but living memories of suffering. At the Death Day party in the Chamber of Secrets, Harry steps into a world that mirrors life but lacks its warmth. The food is rotten, the candles burn cold blue, and the laughter is hollow. The ghosts celebrate their deaths as others celebrate birthdays. Yet beneath the pretense of festivity lies despair. They have chosen to linger, unable or unwilling to pass beyond the veil. "I fear death," Nick admits softly when Harry asks him why he remains. "I was afraid of death. I chose to remain behind. I sometimes wonder whether I oughtn't have—" That pause, that unfinished thought, is the heart of his tragedy. Hogwarts ghosts are not eternal beings of wisdom. They are people who could not accept the inevitable. The ghosts, in their silence and sorrow, are as much a part of Hogwarts as the moving staircases or the enchanted ceilings. They are fragments of history, witnesses to centuries of human weakness. Their presence transforms the castle from a place of learning into a sanctuary of lost souls. Even in the bustling laughter of students, their pale figures glide unseen, watching generations repeat the same mistakes of pride, fear, and love gone wrong. Hogwarts, for all its magic, is a place built upon memories, and memories can haunt as fiercely as spirits. Number 17. The children who grew up after the war. In the aftermath of the war, the world of Harry Potter is forever changed, but not in the way that a child or young reader might assume. The final pages of the saga offer the illusion of peace. The battle is won, Voldemort is defeated, and a new generation of young witches and wizards look forward to a future without fear. Yet, upon closer inspection, especially from the vantage point of adulthood, the true cost of that victory becomes apparent. It is not just the physical scars that are visible, but the invisible wounds, the trauma that festers deep within the hearts and minds of those who lived through the chaos of war. Take Hermione Granger, for example. As a child, she was not just a brilliant student or a courageous friend. She was someone who, at a young age, had to shoulder burdens no one should ever face. The Battle of Hogwarts, the culmination of everything she had fought for, left Hermione with scars that were not visible to the eye. In the final battle, she witnessed death and destruction on an unimaginable scale. She had been tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange in the Malfoy Manor, suffering physical torment that no one, especially a child, should ever endure. Though the war ended and the magical world seemingly returned to normal, Hermione would never be free of that night. She would carry the weight of that fear, that pain, within her forever. The trauma didn't just reside in the memories of torture, but also in the fear of what might come next. Hermione was a warrior, but like many survivors, she could never fully escape the grip of the horrors she had faced. There is a subtle shift in the way she interacts with the world after the war. Her ambition, her determination to right every wrong, perhaps even her drive to change the world for the better, might stem from the deep-seated fear of allowing history to repeat itself. Every political movement, every act of justice she fights for after the war could be seen as a defense mechanism, an attempt to fix the brokenness inside of her. The scars on her body were healed, but the ones on her soul could never be fully erased. Ron Weasley, too, is a casualty of war, but in his case, his trauma is tied to grief. The death of Fred, his twin brother, is a wound that runs deeper than most would imagine. It is not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of a part of himself, a part that can never be replaced. Ron, who had always been the more light-hearted of the trio, was forced to confront death up close and personal in a way that would haunt him forever. The Weasley family, already marked by years of hardship and struggle, found themselves shattered in the aftermath of Fred's death. For Ron, the war ended not with a victorious celebration, but with an overwhelming silence, the absence of the twin who had been with him through every step of his life. Despite his efforts to move forward, to start a family of his own, and to take his place in a world that had finally found peace, Ron's grief lingered. He might have put on a brave face for his children, for Hermione, and for the wizarding world, but inside there was an emptiness that could never be filled. He had been a part of something much larger than himself, and the weight of Fred's absence, the guilt of surviving when his brother did not, was a shadow that would follow him for the rest of his days. Ron's story is one of quiet endurance, of living with the invisible scars that war leaves behind. He would laugh, he would love, and he would rebuild his life, but there would always be a part of him that remained broken, a part of him that could never truly heal. And then there is Harry Potter himself, the boy who lived. His story is perhaps the most tragic of all, not just because of the physical suffering he endured, but because of the emotional scars that were never fully addressed. From the moment he was born, Harry's life had been defined by loss and fear. His parents died protecting him, and he was raised in an environment that sought to suppress him, to treat him as less than human. The Dursleys were cruel, neglecting him and making him feel like an outsider in his own family. When he finally discovered the truth about his magical heritage, it was not a joyous revelation, but a discovery that only deepened his sense of being alone in the world. He had no family, no love, nothing to fall back on except the hope that one day he might defeat Voldemort. The burden Harry carried throughout the series was not just the weight of being the chosen one, but the constant fear that he might not survive, that he might be the one to fail. Throughout his childhood, Harry was constantly confronted with death, whether it was the deaths of his parents, the deaths of his mentors, or the deaths of his closest friends. His life was a series of tragedies, and while he fought valiantly to survive, to protect those he loved, there was a part of him that never truly expected to make it out alive. Even after the final battle, when Voldemort was defeated, Harry could never shake the feeling that he was still the boy marked by death, still the orphan, who had learned to live in the shadow of loss. Number 18. Souls trapped in portraits. In the world of Harry Potter, there are many moments that are easy to overlook in the excitement of magical spells and adventurous quests. Yet as we grow older, certain aspects of J.K. Rowling's carefully crafted universe begin to take on a darker, more profound significance. One such element, initially brushed off as a quirky feature of Hogwarts, is the concept of portraits, specifically the portraits of witches and wizards that appear throughout the castle. As children, these portraits seem merely whimsical, animated images that talk, argue, and offer help to the students. But as we mature and revisit the books, we begin to question something deeper. What if these portraits are not just magical copies? What if they are, in fact, pieces of the souls of the deceased? This revelation is unsettling, for it leads to an unavoidable comparison with the darkest magic in the series, Voldemort's use of Horcruxes. In a way, portraits at Hogwarts seem to reflect a less sinister but still disturbing version of Voldemort's practice, splitting one's soul in order to live on after death. When one considers the portraits, it becomes clear that they are more than just enchanted paintings, they are repositories of consciousness. Portraits, like those of the Fat Lady or Sir Cadogan, are not mere representations of the dead. They are, in some sense, the very essence of the individuals they depict. These magical images are not simply reflections of a person's likeness, but rather a form of immortality. The souls of the deceased, through some form of ancient magic, have been captured and housed within the frames. Take, for example, the portrait of Professor Dumbledore, which appears in several places, most notably in the headmaster's office after his death. After Dumbledore's passing, Harry and others often communicate with the portrait, seeking advice and guidance from the man who once stood at the helm of Hogwarts. It is notable that Dumbledore's portrait is not just a passive image. It speaks with the same wisdom, charm, and authority that Dumbledore himself did in life. It is as if his soul has not entirely moved on, but rather resides within the confines of the painting, still engaged in the world of the living, still offering its guidance. This image of Dumbledore is not the only example of the magical portraits behaving in this manner. Throughout the castle, portraits of former students, professors, and other historical figures provide counsel and occasionally intervene in matters involving the school. Some offer guidance, others engage in arguments or act out their former personalities. While this might seem innocuous on the surface, it is troubling when you begin to ask, is this a noble form of immortality, or is it something far more dangerous, akin to Voldemort's obsession with preventing death at any cost? The idea that the portraits might house actual pieces of the souls of the dead brings us back to the question of why witches and wizards would choose to split their essence in such a manner. In Voldemort's case, his creation of Horcruxes was driven by an obsessive desire to escape death, a desperation that led him down a dark and twisted path. Voldemort's soul was fractured and corrupted by the process. With each fragment that he placed into an object, another piece of his humanity was lost. The portraits, however, do not appear to suffer the same consequence. At least, they do not show the same degradation that Horcruxes display. But the question still remains, is this a form of immortality that wizards consciously choose, or is it something darker, a way of clinging to life that is unnatural and perhaps even morally questionable? There is a certain eeriness about the idea that people choose to live on in this manner, entrapping themselves within a painted frame for eternity. The fact that witches and wizards can willingly preserve their consciousness in a portrait hints at a world where death is not necessarily an end, but a continuation in a different form. However, this form of life is a hollow one, stripped of the full range of human experience. A soul in a portrait is trapped, unable to move freely, unable to experience the joys or sorrows of life. It is not truly living, yet it is not fully dead either. It becomes even more disturbing when one realizes that the practice of creating such portraits is not only a way to preserve one's identity, but also to influence the future. The portraits at Hogwarts, for example, are not just passive images. They hold sway over the events that unfold. The portrait of the Fat Lady, the guardian of Gryffindor Tower, serves as both a protector and a gatekeeper. She interacts with the students, provides them with advice, and occasionally offers a guiding hand. These portraits are not static. They are active participants in the world of the living, shaping events in ways that the original owners might have done had they been alive. This active involvement of portraits in the lives of the living mirrors a key theme of the Harry Potter series, the intersection of life and death. From the very beginning, death is presented as something that the magical world attempts to conquer, whether through the use of the Philosopher's Stone or, more sinisterly, through Horcruxes. The portraits, too, represent a form of magical immortality, but they are more elegant and less overtly malicious than Voldemort's methods. They are, in a sense, a more acceptable way for witches and wizards to continue their existence beyond the grave. But at what cost? While Voldemort's obsession with immortality leads to his corruption, the portraits at Hogwarts raise another question. Is it better to live on in a fragmented form without the full experience of life, or to allow oneself to truly pass on and embrace the natural end of life? In considering the portraits at Hogwarts, we must also reflect on the idea of free will. Portraits seem to act with autonomy, often displaying their own personalities and preferences. Some are known to be particularly helpful, while others are stubborn and prideful. For example, the portrait of Sir Cadogan is known for being eccentric and somewhat pompous, much to the frustration of the students who encounter him. But this raises another unsettling question. Are these portraits truly free? If they are indeed fragments of souls, are they able to choose their actions, or are they doomed to repeat the same patterns of behavior for eternity? If they possess the essence of the original person, do they retain the original person's will, or are they merely imitating the traits of their former selves? This is where the idea of magic as a double-edged sword becomes relevant. While portraits might seem like a benign form of life after death, they represent a broader question about the role of magic in shaping existence. Magic in the wizarding world often appears to bend the rules of nature, offering witches and wizards a chance to escape death, to live on after their bodies have perished. But this power comes with its own set of moral questions. Just as Voldemort's use of dark magic corrupts him and his soul, so too does the magic behind the portraits present a kind of immortality that might ultimately be more harmful than beneficial. Thus the portraits of Hogwarts are not just magical curiosities, they are symbols of a world that is obsessed with the idea of immortality. They are representations of the lengths to which wizards and witches are willing to go to avoid the finality of death, to live on in any form. But the fact that these souls are bound to paintings, unable to interact with the world in a full, meaningful way, should make us question whether this is truly living. The wizarding world, despite its magical wonders, is not so far removed from the darker practices that Voldemort employs. In both cases, magic is used to hold on to life, to prevent death, but at what cost? To the soul. Number 19. The Madness of Azkaban, a prison that breaks minds. Azkaban, the infamous wizarding prison, is a place where darkness lingers, not just in its stone walls, but in the very souls of those confined within. To a child, it's a straightforward concept. It's where bad wizards go, a place of punishment. But for the grown-up reader, Azkaban represents something far more insidious. It's not simply a prison, it's a perverse laboratory of insanity, designed not only to imprison the body, but to strip away the very essence of one's humanity. For most, the terror of Azkaban is defined by its monstrous guards, the Dementors. These creatures, with their cold, chilling presence, are not merely there to keep prisoners locked away. They feed on the most vulnerable parts of the human soul, hope, happiness, and any remnants of joy. As the Dementors draw near, they leave their victims empty, hollow shells of their former selves. It's said that the longer a person stays in Azkaban, the more they lose their sense of identity, their memories, their will to fight. The Dementors do not kill, they simply devour all that makes a person whole. The implications of Azkaban go beyond the supernatural. While the reader might first perceive it as a fantastical setting as the series matures, the prison reveals itself as a metaphor for a far more insidious form of punishment, one that blurs the lines between justice and cruelty. The Ministry of Magic, in its attempt to deal with crime, employs these grotesque creatures as guards, a decision that calls into question the very nature of authority. If the state is willing to use these horrifying creatures to guard its prisoners, then how different is the ministry from the very criminals it seeks to punish? Azkaban stands as a dark reminder of a system that seeks not rehabilitation, but the complete eradication of humanity. The Dementors, with their ability to drain a person of their very essence, make it clear that the Ministry of Magic isn't just imprisoning bodies, it is breaking spirits. The process isn't just about punishment, it's about control. When the Dementors torture prisoners with their worst memories and strip away their ability to feel, they leave them as nothing more than empty vessels. It is a horrifying glimpse into the depth of cruelty that can exist within a state willing to go to any length to maintain order. In the case of Sirius Black, one of Azkaban's most infamous prisoners, the consequences of this system become even more apparent. Sirius was wrongly accused of betraying his best friend James Potter to Lord Voldemort. His time in Azkaban, where he was held without trial for 12 years, is a testament to the horror of the system. Despite being innocent, he was subjected to the same relentless torment as every other prisoner, and in his case, the toll was particularly severe. The most tragic part of Sirius's imprisonment was not just the years lost, but the complete loss of faith he experienced in everything he had once believed. The isolation, the constant presence of the Dementors, and the overwhelming despair slowly turned him into someone different. The world had ended for him. As the book describes, he became a shell of the person he once was, his mind and soul ravaged by the torment of his unjust punishment. But Sirius was not the only one affected by Azkaban's horrors. Even those who had been imprisoned for lesser crimes were not immune to its corrupting influence. The prison has a way of breaking those who enter, leaving them so scarred that their return to society is impossible. This is made clear when we consider the fate of other characters who had spent time there, like Bellatrix Lestrange. Known for her fanatic loyalty to Voldemort, Bellatrix was locked away in Azkaban after torturing the Longbottoms to insanity. She was one of the most notorious inmates, and her madness, born from the long years of isolation and the relentless Dementor influence, manifested in an almost gleeful cruelty. Bellatrix's time in Azkaban didn't break her spirit, it warped it into something far darker. She returned to the world more dangerous than ever, more willing to commit atrocities without a second thought. Azkaban is a system that operates on fear. Fear of the Dementors, fear of the unknown, fear of the Ministry's authority. It is a world where the state uses terror as its weapon, not just against criminals, but against anyone who dares question its power. The very idea that such a place exists within the magical world is a reflection of the darker, more authoritarian side of human society. We see that the Ministry doesn't just seek to imprison those who break the law, they seek to break the very people they imprison. And in this, Azkaban stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. In many ways, Azkaban serves as a reflection of the darker forces that lurk within any society. It is a place where the worst aspects of human nature are laid bare, the willingness to dehumanize others in the name of justice, the desire to control and manipulate through fear, and the ever-present danger of turning a blind eye to cruelty. The Ministry's decision to allow the Dementors to govern Azkaban is a telling commentary on the corruption of those in power. It asks the difficult question: when a society allows the use of such monsters to maintain order, what does that say about the nature of the law itself? The idea that the Ministry would entrust such dangerous creatures with the task of guarding prisoners is a chilling one. The Dementors are not merely guards, they are instruments of psychological and emotional destruction. Their presence in Azkaban is a metaphor for the way in which a system can strip away a person's dignity, self-worth, and humanity. It's not enough to imprison the body. The Ministry of Magic's true goal is to break the spirit, to render those imprisoned incapable of ever returning to society as whole individuals. The mental and emotional toll of Azkaban cannot be overstated. When Harry Potter first hears about the horrors of the prison, it seems like just another part of the wizarding world's dark history. But as he grows older and experiences the true depth of its effects, the significance of Azkaban becomes clearer. The Dementors' ability to suck the life and hope from their victims is a reminder of just how far the Ministry is willing to go to control and punish its people. It is not just the bodies that are imprisoned, it is the very essence of the person. In the end, Azkaban is a reflection of how systems of power can warp and corrupt even the best intentions. It is not enough to punish those who break the law. The Ministry's use of Dementors reveals a darker truth. The system itself is broken. It operates on fear, cruelty, and the desire to strip away everything that makes a person whole. Azkaban is not just a place where bad wizards go, it is a symbol of the dehumanizing effect of unchecked authority. It is a place where no one comes out the same, if they ever come out at all. And as the story of Sirius Black teaches us, even those who are wrongfully imprisoned are not exempt from the horrors of Azkaban. The cost of such a system is not just in the lives it ruins, but in the very soul of the society that allows it to exist. Number 20. Betrayal and Silence, the Hidden Cost of War. During the Second Wizarding War, a period that defined the lives of countless witches and wizards, many made choices that would haunt them long after the battle had ended. Victory was won, but the cost was immense, and the scars left behind were often invisible. As a child, it was easy to see the war as a clear-cut battle between good and evil. The brave Order of the Phoenix stood as a beacon of hope, while the Death Eaters lurked in the shadows, spreading fear and chaos. But when we grow older, we begin to understand that there was more to the story, something darker, more complicated. There were those who did not choose a side, those who chose survival over loyalty, and those who, in their silence, allowed atrocities to unfold. Around them, take Neville Longbottom, for example. The war's eventual hero, the one who would stand up to Voldemort, was not always the brave figure we remember. He was once a timid, unsure boy who struggled to meet the expectations of his family and the world. Yet through immense personal growth, he rose to the occasion when the time came. Neville's transformation into a hero is the stuff of legend, but we must ask, how many others were like him, capable of heroism but never given the chance to act? How many remained silent, choosing the safety of conformity over the risk of defiance? The consequences of silence are profound. Neville's bravery stands in stark contrast to the many who made less heroic choices. Some fought with honor, others with fear, but there were those who simply did nothing. The truth is, war is not just about the battle between good and evil. It is about the choices individuals make when faced with impossible decisions. There were wizards and witches who knew the right thing to do but stayed quiet, unwilling to act. It was safer to keep their heads down, to avoid drawing attention, to turn a blind eye to the suffering around them. Consider the story of Peter Pettigrew, one of the most tragic and telling examples of betrayal during the war. Once a loyal friend to James Potter, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, Pettigrew's betrayal was not just the act of one individual, but a reflection of the failure to make the right choice when it mattered most. The young Peter, full of potential and promise, chose the path of self-preservation. He betrayed his closest friends, leading to the deaths of James and Lily Potter, and spent the next years hiding in fear as a rat, literally and metaphorically. His survival came at the cost of others' lives, and this is a cost that never truly leaves him. He died in a desperate, hopeless attempt to redeem his actions, but by then it was too late. Betrayal during the war was not limited to overt acts of treason. Many chose to align with Voldemort, not because they believed in his ideology, but because it was the safest option. Some joined the Death Eaters, hoping that in doing so they would secure their own place in the new order that Voldemort promised. Their loyalty was conditional, based not on shared ideals, but on self-interest. Among these was Igor Karkaroff, the former headmaster of Durmstrang Institute. Karkaroff's past was a patchwork of allegiances, some of them dark and dangerous. His role in the Death Eaters was one of opportunism, not ideology. After the war, he lived in fear of being caught for his past crimes, constantly looking over his shoulder. He betrayed his comrades and later lived with the weight of his silence, knowing that he had done nothing to stop the horrors that unfolded. But not everyone who kept quiet during the war was a coward or a traitor. Some were simply paralyzed by fear. The fear of losing everything, their family, their home, their life, was enough to make them silent witnesses to the suffering around them. The Malfoy family is a perfect example of this. Lucius Malfoy, a powerful and influential figure in the wizarding world, initially appeared to be one of Voldemort's most loyal followers. However, his true loyalties were never as clear-cut as they seemed. Lucius's wife, Narcissa, and their son, Draco, were never fully invested in the Dark Lord's cause. Narcissa, in particular, made a choice to protect her son at all costs, even if it meant betraying the very ideals her family had long upheld. Draco, too, found himself torn between the pressures of his family and his growing distaste for Voldemort's methods. It is easy to dismiss them as mere followers of the Dark Lord, but upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that their silence was a desperate attempt to protect their loved ones from the horrors of war. There were others, like the Carrows, who relished in the power Voldemort's regime offered them. Aileen and Amicus Carrow, two of the most sadistic Death Eaters, found joy in their ability to torment others. Their actions during the war were driven not by fear, but by a thirst for power and revenge. In contrast to the Malfoys, who feared for their lives, the Carrows actively sought to inflict harm. Their betrayal was not a matter of self-preservation, but of embracing the dark power that Voldemort promised. Their silence was deafening in its cruelty, and it was this kind of silence, one that echoes with sadistic pleasure, that leaves the deepest scars. The consequences of choosing survival over action were felt long after the war ended. Many who remained silent found themselves haunted by their inaction. For some, the guilt was unbearable. For others, it was a matter of convenience, as they buried their shame beneath the facade of normalcy. The wizarding world after the war was not one of perfect peace and harmony, but a world of quiet suffering. The guilt of those who had failed to act was palpable, yet it was a guilt rarely spoken of. In the aftermath of the war, no one wanted to acknowledge the complexities of the choices made. Instead, there was a collective desire to move forward, to rebuild, to forget. Even the very institutions that were meant to lead the world into a better future, like the Ministry of Magic, were not immune to this silence. The ministry, led by Cornelius Fudge during much of the war, was complicit in its own failure to act. Fudge's refusal to acknowledge the growing power of Voldemort and his relentless campaign of denial only allowed the Dark Lord to rise unchecked. Even after the war, the ministry continued to cover up its own failures, preferring to gloss over its role in the events that led to so much loss. It wasn't just the Death Eaters or those who chose silence in the face of evil that were to blame. The complacency of the ministry itself allowed the war to escalate as it did. The people who lived with their choices after the war were often the ones who bore the heaviest burdens. For them, the war was not a clear-cut victory, but a lingering trauma, one that would never fully heal. Their silence was not merely a personal choice, it was a reflection of the larger societal reluctance to confront the dark truths of the past. The survivors, those who had made their choices, lived with the knowledge that the price of survival was often the loss of something much more important, their integrity. In the end, the victory in the Second Wizarding War was not without its cost. The war's winners, those who fought bravely and proudly, were celebrated, but the true cost of the war was hidden in the silent guilt of those who did nothing, those who betrayed their friends, and those who simply kept quiet. They too were left to live in the shadow of the war, carrying with them the weight of their choices, choices that were often not as clear as they appeared at first glance. The blood on their hands was not washed away by victory. Instead, it became a permanent reminder that in war, silence can be just as damaging as betrayal. Number 21, Horace Slughorn and the Moral Decay of Wizarding Society. Gilderoy Lockhart may have been the wizard who popularized the idea of charm and charisma in the wizarding world, but it is Gorias Slughorn who embodies the more sinister version of this principle. A man who knows how to use people, who understands the power of favoritism and influence. Slughorn's world is one where talent is currency, and people are mere tools for advancement. Beneath the polished veneer of joviality and pleasant manners lies a dark reality. Slughorn's obsession with success, his need to surround himself with the brightest stars, creates a world that dehumanizes the weak and casts aside those who don't contribute to his grand vision. When first introduced, Slughorn seems like the ideal teacher, a mentor who nurtures his students, offering wisdom and guidance, basking in the glow of their successes. He is charming, easy to talk to, and seemingly supportive of everyone around him. But when we look more closely at his relationships, we begin to see the true extent of his manipulation. He does not care about the students themselves, but about what they can give him. He is not a mentor who supports his students for their growth, but one who collects the talented, the ambitious, the ones who will achieve great things. The others, those who are weak or who do not stand out, are discarded, left to fend for themselves, or, worse still, ignored. Slughorn's circle of favourites is exclusive, but its importance is not in the closeness of their relationships or in genuine camaraderie. It lies in the potential power that each person represents. He keeps these students close not because he truly cares about them, but because they serve as stepping stones, tools to be used for his own social and professional benefit. When Harry Potter enters his world, Slughorn's reaction is not one of concern or warmth, but of strategic calculation. Slughorn recognizes Harry as a prize, a beacon of success. The young boy's fame is something Slughorn wants to capture and add to his collection. Yet Harry's true worth, his loyalty, his character, matters little to Slughorn in comparison to what he represents in terms of status. At the heart of Slughorn's behavior lies a twisted morality. He values the power of status and success, not the inherent goodness of a person. He is willing to overlook the darker sides of his favourites, and he does so with a sense of justification. He rationalizes his actions, perhaps unaware of the harm he is perpetuating, or perhaps too steeped in the world of manipulation to care. It is a world where power structures dictate worth, and where those who fail to climb the social ladder are doomed to obscurity. This philosophy is one that thrives within the walls of the Hogwarts castle, and it reflects a society at large where success and influence are measured by one's ability to navigate such power dynamics. The idea of love and affection in Slughorn's world is equally twisted. Where other characters might seek to understand, support, or care for others, Slughorn sees love as something to be manipulated. His use of relationships is transactional, a way to secure further status, further influence. He is the embodiment of a darker form of attraction, one that isn't about true connection, but about control and manipulation. His affection for his favourites is not driven by love or the desire for their well-being, but by the potential benefits they can offer him. These relationships are not rooted in true emotional bonds, but in a currency of admiration and usefulness. In his world, love becomes a weapon, one to be wielded for control, for the securing of favours and advantages. Perhaps the most telling example of Slughorn's twisted view of relationships comes through his treatment of Tom Riddle, later known as Lord Voldemort. Riddle, as a student, is someone Slughorn takes an interest in, initially due to his impressive abilities and potential. However, when the darker elements of Riddle's character begin to emerge, his ambition, his ruthlessness, his lack of empathy, Slughorn's fascination turns to fear, yet he still remains loyal to him. Slughorn's moral collapse is evident in his refusal to speak out about the danger Riddle represents. His silence is not a product of ignorance, but of cowardice. He is more concerned with protecting his own position and maintaining his place in the social hierarchy than with confronting the truth. His actions, or lack thereof, demonstrate how deeply embedded the culture of manipulation and status is within him. It is also worth noting how the wizarding world as a whole is built on a similar set of principles. Like Slughorn, many in the wizarding society value power, wealth, and status above all else. They prize connections and influence, and these are the things that truly matter. In this world, the purity of bloodlines is often seen as a symbol of status, and those who possess it are afforded special privileges. Slughorn's obsession with talent, success, and connections mirrors the larger societal trends that permeate the wizarding world. It is a world where ambition is celebrated, where power is the ultimate goal, and where those who fail to achieve success are often discarded. The magical world's power structures, like the ones found in the Muggle world, reward those who can navigate the social terrain with ease. Slughorn's place within this structure is built not on merit or kindness, but on his ability to manipulate and to use others for his own gain. His collection of talented students, those who rise to the top of society, becomes his shield, his status symbol, and his defense against being forgotten. He is a man who believes that love, friendship, and loyalty are not inherently good things but are instead tools that can be bent to one's will. The influence of Slughorn, like the larger structures of power in the wizarding world, has a profound impact on those around him. His actions shape the world in subtle ways, creating a culture where ambition is valued above all else, where success is the only thing that matters, and where love is nothing more than a transactional currency. This is the darker side of the wizarding world, the side that remains largely hidden in plain sight, much like Slughorn himself. Behind his warm smile and charismatic persona lies a man who, despite his superficial charm, embodies the worst aspects of human ambition, an ambition that, left unchecked, leads to moral decay and the breakdown of genuine human connection. In many ways, Slughorn's moral decay mirrors that of the society he inhabits. The wizarding world is not a utopia but a reflection of the same flawed principles that govern the Muggle world. In both societies, the powerful are able to dictate the rules, and the weak are often left behind. Slughorn's world is one where status and power are the only things that truly matter, and it is a world that is far more concerned with the outward appearance of success than with the inner truth of a person's character. Through Slughorn, J.K. Rowling offers a powerful critique of societal values and the corrupting influence of ambition. He is a man who, though charming and affable on the surface, embodies the dangers of a society that elevates power and success above all else. His manipulation of love, his transactional relationships, and his disregard for the less fortunate serve as a dark mirror to the world in which we live, where the pursuit of status often leads to moral compromise and the erosion of true human connection. Number 22. Artifacts that feed on human pain. In the world of Harry Potter, magic is both wondrous and dangerous, a force that holds the power to shape the very fabric of reality. But as we grow older, rereading the series with new perspectives, we begin to notice something darker lurking beneath the enchanting spells and charming creatures. One of the most unsettling themes in J.K. Rowling's work is the way certain magical artifacts thrive on the pain, fear, and desires of human beings. These items, from Tom Riddle's diary to the cursed mirror of Erised, are not mere objects of power. They are vessels that feed on the emotions that bind us, our weaknesses, our insecurities, our longing. Magic, it turns out, is not just about wands and incantations. It is also about our internal struggles and the dark forces that arise from within ourselves. The Diary of Tom Riddle is a perfect example of this unsettling phenomenon. A seemingly innocent object, it draws its power from the desperation and longing of those who encounter it. Ginny Weasley, a young girl still coming to terms with her place in the world, finds herself drawn to the diary, hoping it will offer her solace and attention. The diary, however, has a much darker purpose. It feeds on her loneliness, her desire for recognition, and ultimately her vulnerability. As Ginny writes in it, she unknowingly offers her soul to the diary, allowing Tom Riddle's memory to possess her. The diary itself does not merely exist as a physical object. It is alive with a malevolent force that preys on the emotional state of the user, turning Ginny's desperation into a conduit for riddles return. This artifact's connection to human pain is not merely symbolic, it is integral to its very existence. Ginny's emotional state directly impacts the power of the diary, and her descent into despair feeds Riddle's power, making him stronger as she weakens. It's a poignant commentary on how, often, our greatest weaknesses, loneliness, insecurity, and our yearning for approval, can be manipulated and twisted into something dark and dangerous. The Horcruxes are another chilling example of magical artifacts that are deeply entwined with the suffering of the human soul. Voldemort, in his quest for immortality, splits his soul into multiple pieces, hiding them in various objects, each a Horcrux. These objects are not just containers of power, but they are also steeped in a deep, twisted connection to death, pain, and fear. The very nature of a Horcrux is that it is created through murder, the most horrific of acts, and each fragment of Voldemort's soul is tainted with the agony of the life it was torn from. Voldemort's obsession with death and his fear of mortality becomes his undoing. The Horcruxes represent not just his attempts to conquer death, but also his deep-seated terror of it. The objects themselves are not lifeless. They hold a kind of malevolent will, a will that seeks to corrupt and consume those who come into contact with them. When Harry and his friends seek out and destroy the Horcruxes, they do not merely destroy physical objects, they are battling the very essence of Voldemort's fears and insecurities. The Horcruxes, like the diary, feed on the darkness in people's hearts and minds, amplifying their weaknesses and pushing them toward acts of violence and despair. Among the most tragic of these magical objects is the Mirror of Erised, which shows the deepest, most desperate desires of those who look into it. For Harry Potter, the mirror is a source of endless longing. It shows him the image of his deceased parents, a family he never had the chance to know. Harry's yearning for a family, for love, and for connection is so great that it clouds his judgment. The mirror's power lies in the way it preys on Harry's deepest desires, making him lose himself in a fantasy of what could have been. He becomes obsessed with it, to the point where he visits it night after night, feeding on the illusion of his parents. The mirror, in turn, becomes a parasite, feeding off his pain and loneliness. Dumbledore wisely cautions Harry that the mirror shows us nothing more than our desires, and that to live in the past is to live a life of emptiness. The mirror's true danger lies in how it traps people in their own emotional pain, encouraging them to reject reality and live in a fantasy where their desires are fulfilled. It's a stark reminder that sometimes our greatest strengths, our love, our hopes, our dreams, can be turned against us, consumed by darker forces that prey on our weaknesses. The magical artifacts of the Harry Potter world all share this chilling characteristic. They do not simply exist in the world of magic. They are vessels that feed on human emotions. Whether it is the deep loneliness that drives Ginny to the diary, the fear of death that creates the Horcruxes, or the longing for lost loved ones that traps Harry in the Mirror of Erised. These objects are a reflection of the dark side of human nature. They do not simply mirror our desires and fears, they amplify them, twisting them into something far more dangerous. This theme underscores a central truth in the Harry Potter series. The true source of darkness is not the magic itself, but the human heart. The power of the Dark Lord, of the Horcruxes, and of the diary does not lie in their magical properties alone. It lies in the human emotions that fuel them. Voldemort's fear of death, Harry's yearning for his family, Ginny's desperate need for attention, all of these are emotions that are universal, emotions that everyone can relate to. And it is this shared vulnerability that makes these objects so dangerous. They feed not on the external world, but on the internal, twisting the human soul and turning it against itself. The diary, the Horcruxes, and the Mirror of Erist also serve as metaphors for the way in which pain, fear, and longing can consume us in real life. Just as these objects feed on the emotional states of the characters, so too do our personal struggles, our regrets, our fears, our unhealed wounds, have the power to take control of us. The magic in these artifacts is not just the result of spells and incantations. It is the manifestation of the characters' inner turmoil, their unresolved emotions, and their inability to face the darkness within themselves. These objects reflect not just the external battle against dark forces, but also the internal battle each character faces as they struggle to overcome their own weaknesses and fears. What is most striking about these magical items is that they do not simply exist as symbols of power or danger. They are, in many ways, mirrors of the human experience itself. The diary does not just represent Riddle's evil, it represents Ginny's loneliness and desperation. The Horcruxes do not just represent Voldemort's quest for immortality, they represent his profound fear of death, a fear that is deeply human. And the Mirror of Erist does not just represent a magical reflection, it represents Harry's deep, unhealed wounds, his loss, his yearning, his emotional emptiness. These objects, in their dark magic, reflect the darkness within us all. The true danger of these magical artifacts, then, is not that they are inherently evil, but that they prey on the very things that make us human. They are not the result of curses or spells cast by dark wizards. They are the manifestations of our deepest vulnerabilities, our need for love, our fear of loss, our desire for recognition, and our longing for connection. And it is through our emotions, our weaknesses, and our unhealed pain that the darkness in the world of Harry Potter is born. The magic that feeds on our weaknesses is not just a force to be fought, it is a reflection of the battles we face within ourselves. Number 23. Used children. The fate of Harry, Neville, and others. When you first dive into the world of Harry Potter, it's easy to see Harry as the quintessential hero, the chosen one, a symbol of good destined to defeat the dark forces of the wizarding world. The magical adventure is exciting, filled with new friendships, thrilling moments, and spells that leave you in awe. Yet, as you grow older and perhaps revisit the story, a different truth emerges. The most jarring realization comes when you understand that Harry, Neville, Hermione, and the others were not just participants in the great battle between good and evil. They were pawns, used by the very adults who claimed to be protecting them. The characters we come to love and admire are, in many ways, manipulated by the older generations. Harry is thrust into the conflict not because he has a choice, but because others, such as Albus Dumbledore, believe his fate is already sealed. Dumbledore, a man we initially see as a wise, benevolent figure, is revealed to have been playing his own long game. Harry, with his connection to Voldemort and the prophecy surrounding his life, becomes a tool in this intricate and often dangerous political struggle. While Dumbledore protects him, guiding him through perilous situations, he also steers Harry toward the ultimate confrontation with Voldemort. Dumbledore sees Harry as the key to victory, but at what cost? "You must be the one to kill the Dark Lord, Harry. It is your destiny." As a child, Harry believes in his own role as the hero, seeing himself as the one who will save the day. But as he matures, it becomes evident that his life, his fate, and even his struggles have been orchestrated by forces far beyond his control. He is, in essence, an instrument of a much larger plan, one designed by Dumbledore and other powerful figures. Dumbledore's manipulation of Harry is perhaps most evident in his decision to withhold crucial information about Harry's own life. The revelation that Harry is a mere pawn in the grand chess game of the wizarding world becomes harder to ignore as the books progress. "I never meant for you to have to fight this battle alone," Dumbledore admits, but the damage is done. Harry's whole childhood has been a series of events orchestrated to lead him to the final confrontation with Voldemort, with little consideration for the psychological toll it takes on him. Similarly, Neville Longbottom, the seemingly awkward and underestimated Gryffindor, becomes another example of the used children. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, we learn about the prophecy that links Neville and Harry to the defeat of Voldemort. However, as events unfold, it becomes clear that Neville, like Harry, is a pawn in a larger game. He was never meant to lead the charge against Voldemort, though he was certainly capable of it. Instead, his fate was shaped by the same forces that manipulated Harry's, and he too was made to feel as though his purpose in life was to serve the mission rather than to make his own choices. Neville's arc is a painful reminder of the vulnerability of children in a world run by adults who use them for their own agendas. Hermione Granger is another child who is ultimately drawn into the adults' war. While she is perhaps the most self-sufficient and intellectually capable of the trio, even she is not immune to the manipulation that surrounds her. Throughout the series, Hermione becomes increasingly aware of how her contributions are being directed, whether it's in terms of her intellect, her ability to find solutions, or her natural leadership qualities. She is often the voice of reason, but even her reason is shaped by the mission handed down to her by Dumbledore and the other influential adults. Even in the midst of their adventures, Hermione is often used as the mediator, the one who can smooth over the tension between Harry and Ron, and the one who brings the knowledge necessary to push the mission forward. In the end, Hermione may have more agency than Harry and Neville, but even she is ultimately a part of something much larger than herself. The darker side of this realization becomes apparent as we consider the emotional toll these children experience. While the adults may offer some level of protection, they also place these children in life-threatening situations, all for a cause that they may not fully understand or choose for themselves. For instance, the pivotal battle at the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is a moment of great danger, one where Harry and his friends are not simply fighting for survival, but for something much larger. And yet they are still being controlled by the forces around them. Even their most noble actions are driven by the desires of others. Harry is ultimately used as a pawn to distract the Death Eaters, and in doing so he not only risks his life but also places his friends in harm's way. They are seen not as children in need of protection but as necessary tools to carry out a mission set by others. The Ministry of Magic, which should have been a place of safety and support for Harry and his friends, also contributes to the exploitation of the young heroes. The bureaucratic mess that is the Ministry and the arrogance of characters like Cornelius Fudge demonstrate just how little the adults in Harry's world think about the children they are willing to sacrifice. They are used to further the Ministry's own agenda, especially when it comes to maintaining power and control over the wizarding world. The Ministry's role in the story often highlights the ruthlessness of adult politics and how children, who should be protected from such concerns, are instead forced to grow up far too quickly. The final blow comes when Harry learns that even his most trusted protector, Dumbledore, has not been entirely truthful with him. The revelation that Dumbledore had kept so much from Harry about his own role in the battle against Voldemort is a devastating one. Harry realizes that everything he thought he knew about his life, his role, and his destiny was shaped by others who used him as a means to an end. The tragedy of this realization is made all the more poignant when Harry is forced to confront the reality that he may have been nothing more than a tool for someone else's vision. As the books progress, the characters begin to understand that victory does not make them free. Even though they defeat Voldemort, they are still left with the emotional scars of having been used by those they trusted. The emotional damage caused by their roles in the battle is not easily healed. Harry, in particular, is forced to come to terms with the fact that his childhood was stolen from him by those who saw him as a means to an end. The final victory, as sweet as it may seem, does not erase the years of manipulation and emotional trauma that Harry and his friends endured. They are free from Voldemort, but they are not free from the consequences of having been used. The lasting impact of this realization is seen in how the characters cope with their past as they grow older. Harry, Neville, and Hermione all struggle with the weight of what was done to them, and they find themselves questioning the choices made by those who controlled their fates. They may have defeated the dark forces of their world, but they have not escaped the consequences of the actions taken by those around them. The final message of the Harry Potter series is a sobering one. Victory does not always bring freedom, and sometimes the greatest battles are fought within oneself. Ultimately, the story of Harry Potter, Neville Longbottom, and Hermione Granger is one of growth and understanding. They begin as innocent children swept up in a world of magic and danger, believing they are heroes in a battle for the greater good. But as they grow older, they come to understand the darker truth. They were used by those in power, manipulated for a purpose they did not choose. In the end, the true struggle lies not in the battle against Voldemort, but in the fight for self-awareness, healing, and the courage to reclaim one's own life after being used. Number 24. Gringotts, the greed that governs the magical world. Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank, appears to a child as a place of mystery, grandeur, and wonder, its towering marble columns and forbidding goblin guards painting an image of a world that is at once fantastical and unimaginable. Yet to an adult reader, this scene begins to unravel into something far more sinister, a reflection of the harsh, often discriminatory realities of the wizarding world, a microcosm of greed, power, and the systemic inequality that binds both wizards and magical creatures. The goblins, creatures whose ancient magic and cunning have long been revered, run the bank with a level of precision and efficiency that is unmatched. But despite their powerful abilities, they are not on an equal footing with the wizards they serve. This is a world in which magical creatures are often relegated to subservient roles, their talents and labor exploited by those who hold the power. In Gringotts, the goblins manage vast sums of wealth, and yet they cannot claim ownership over the very vaults they guard. They are paid for their work, but they do not reap the benefits of the riches they protect. This creates a stark contrast to the wizarding world's obsession with wealth and status, where gold is considered the ultimate marker of power and influence. In a conversation that takes place in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione first visit Gringotts, they witness the goblins' stern but meticulous manner as they handled the vaults. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, Harry is told, and to a child this might feel comforting. However, the adult reader starts to see that this safety comes with a price. The goblins may hold the keys to unimaginable wealth, but they do so at the expense of their own rights and freedom. The wizarding world, filled with its wonders, is built upon a foundation of systemic inequality, where magical creatures like the goblins are exploited their status as second-class beings firmly entrenched in a society that allows for their servitude. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the history between goblins and wizards is hinted at, painting a more vivid picture of the bitterness that permeates this relationship. Goblins were once equal to wizards in power, but as time passed, their rights were stripped away. Their participation in the founding of Gringotts and their once shared control of magic is now largely forgotten or dismissed by the wizarding elite. The goblins are relegated to serving their magical masters, unable to wield their ancient magic in a society that values only the power of human wizards. It is a painful irony that in a world capable of performing extraordinary feats of magic, the systems of oppression and greed that are all too familiar in the real world are perpetuated. One of the most telling aspects of the goblins' relationship with wizards comes from their approach to money. Goblins are skilled in the art of finance, managing vast sums of gold with expertise, yet the very notion of goblins owning the gold they guard is unthinkable. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry first visits Gringotts, he learns that vaults are not only used for storing wealth, but also for securing power. The wealth inside Gringotts represents more than just riches. It is a form of control. For the goblins, their labor does not equate to ownership or autonomy. They are deeply bound to the very wealth they manage, but they cannot lay claim to it. The vaults they guard belong to others, and they are compensated with gold that is not theirs to keep. They perform their duties with precision and efficiency, yet they are denied the power that comes with the very currency they protect. The most tragic aspect of this dynamic is the irony of it all. In a world where magic can defy the laws of nature, the fundamental laws of power, greed, and inequality remain unchallenged. The goblin's plight underscores a harsh truth of the wizarding world, a world where inequality is institutionalized, where creatures like the goblins, house elves, and others are systematically denied rights, opportunities, and autonomy. Gringotts, as a symbol of wealth and security, becomes a stark reminder of the deep-seated prejudice and discrimination that governs the magical world. While Gringotts represents the economic power structure of the wizarding world, it also serves as a metaphor for the broader societal issues that pervade magical society. The fact that goblins are denied equal rights, that their ancient magic is undervalued and exploited, reflects the larger theme of how power is concentrated in the hands of a few, and how the systems that enable this power remain largely unquestioned. The way in which wizards treat goblins parallels the way in which wealth and power in the real world often come at the expense of marginalized groups. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the goblins' resentment towards wizards comes to a head when Gringotts is infiltrated by Harry and his allies. The daring heist, which requires the help of a goblin named Griphook, reveals just how far the goblins have been pushed. They are not just servants, they are rebels, fighting for their own sense of justice and autonomy, however misplaced their methods may be. Griphook, in particular, is driven by a desire to reclaim what he believes is his rightful share of the treasure locked away in the vaults. His actions highlight the deep-seated bitterness that has been simmering beneath the surface of the goblin-wizard relationship for centuries. But what is perhaps most poignant about this conflict is the fact that Gringotts, as a magical institution, is a reflection of the wizarding world's inability to break free from the very same destructive principles that define the real world. In a society where magic can grant individuals unimaginable power, the structures of greed and inequality remain intact, perpetuating a cycle of exploitation that affects not only magical creatures, but also the people who live within this system. The wizarding world's inability to address these issues speaks to the broader themes of societal injustice and inequality. themes that are often overshadowed by the more glamorous aspects of the magical world. The events of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows serve as a harsh reminder of the consequences of unchecked power and greed. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione work with Griphook to infiltrate Gringotts, they encounter the layers of corruption and prejudice that have defined the relationship between wizards and goblins for centuries. The vaults they are trying to access are not just symbolic of wealth, they represent the deep divides that exist between different magical communities, divides that are rooted in a history of exploitation and injustice. Ultimately, Gringotts and the goblins who run it serve as a powerful metaphor for the ways in which wealth and power can corrupt and oppress. The magical bank, with all its glittering treasures and imposing architecture, stands as a monument to a world built on the principles of greed, control, and inequality. The goblins, with their ancient magic and fierce sense of pride, are forced to serve in a system that denies them the very rights they once enjoyed, a system that continues to perpetuate the cycle of discrimination and exploitation. In a world where magic can do anything, it is perhaps the most heartbreaking reality of all that the true power of wealth remains out of reach for those who are not born with the privilege of human wizardry. Number 25. Professor Trelawney, a tragic. Joke about faith and vision. In the world of Harry Potter, few characters embody the divide between perception and reality as strikingly as Professor Sybil Trelawney. To the young readers who first encounter her, she may seem nothing more than a caricature, a comically eccentric, scatterbrained woman draped in flowing scarves whose mystical predictions often land in the realm of the ridiculous. Yet as the years pass and readers return to J.K. Rowling's series, a darker, more poignant layer of Trelawney's character begins to emerge. She represents, in many ways, a tragic irony that mirrors the human tendency to ridicule what we do not understand, and to dismiss those whose insights defy the conventional. When Harry first meets Trelawney, she is the very embodiment of whimsical fortune-telling. With her wild, frizzy hair and her dramatic flair, she appears at once absurd and distant from the rigorous realities of Hogwarts. To many, she is a figure of ridicule, a teacher whose lessons are marked by over-the-top gestures and cryptic utterances. Her students, particularly Harry, Ron, and Hermione, do not take her seriously. They laugh at her theatrics and dismiss her warnings with the kind of carefree indifference typical of youth. Even Trelawney herself seems to exist in a fog of uncertainty, her predictions often verging on the fantastical. But beneath the layers of theatrics, Trelawney's story is far more complex. For readers who encounter the books as children, her eccentricity offers little more than comic relief. However, as adults, we begin to recognize the deeper currents of sadness that run through her life. Trelawney, in her own way, is a woman who has been relentlessly marginalized and rejected. She is a seer whose gifts are not understood or respected, a woman whose profound insights are brushed off as the ramblings of a madwoman. This is perhaps most clearly illustrated when she first predicts Harry's arrival at Hogwarts. She claims, in her usual cryptic manner, that the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him. At the time, this seems no more than a puzzling statement that the characters, including Harry, pay little attention to. Trelawney is a joke to them, someone to be humoured but not taken seriously. The irony, however, becomes impossible to ignore as the series progresses. It is Trelawney of all people who makes the key prophecies that shape the entire narrative. Her first prophecy, made in the early days of Harry's arrival at Hogwarts, turns out to be one of the most crucial in the entire wizarding world. It is she, in her eccentricity, who predicts Harry's connection to the Dark Lord, an event that sets the stage for the entire battle between good and evil in the wizarding world. And yet, despite the gravity of what she has foretold, No one believes her. She is laughed at, mocked for her apparent madness, and branded as an unreliable figure. The second prophecy, even more significant, is uttered under the most dramatic of circumstances. Trelawney predicts the return of Voldemort, his resurrection at the hands of his followers, and the rise of the dark forces once again. Again, her predictions are dismissed by those in power, including the very people who would later become the key players in the fight against Voldemort. Dumbledore, a man of immense wisdom and understanding, is one of the few who sees the weight of Trelawney's words for what they are. But even he, at first, treats her with the kind of patronizing indifference that seems to be the lot of all those who dare to see beyond the ordinary. What makes Trelawney's character so tragic is not just the fact that she is dismissed by the magical world, but that she is rejected for the very thing that makes her valuable, her ability to see what others cannot. Trelawney is not merely a prophet in the conventional sense. She is a woman who embodies the painful isolation that often accompanies extraordinary insight. She sees truths that no one else does, but instead of being celebrated for her gifts, she is cast aside as a madwoman. This mirrors the way society often treats those who possess the ability to perceive things that others cannot, a phenomenon that is not confined to the world of magic. In our own world, individuals who challenge the status quo or offer unconventional perspectives are frequently dismissed or ridiculed. The tension between Trelawney's extraordinary abilities and her social rejection speaks to a larger theme in the Harry Potter series, the way society tends to shut out those who are different, particularly those whose differences lie in realms of intuition or spiritual insight. Trelawney represents a figure who dares to see what is hidden from others, but who is punished for that gift. This is further emphasized by her deep loneliness. Though she holds a position of respect at Hogwarts, she is, in many ways, a solitary figure. She has few true allies, and her presence often seems like a desperate cry for recognition, for validation of her abilities. The dissonance between her inner world, her knowledge and her gifts, and the world around her, which dismisses her, creates a profound sense of isolation. The sense of Trelawney's tragic loneliness is underscored by her relationship with her students. While she does have moments of connection with them, particularly in her role as a teacher, those relationships are superficial. The students do not truly understand her, nor do they appreciate the depth of what she is offering. Instead, they see her as an amusing curiosity, someone who can provide them with a few entertaining moments in between their other, more serious lessons. It is only when the stakes are high, when the battle between good and evil escalates to a fever pitch, that the true weight of Trelawney's words becomes clear. In those moments, we realize that the laughter and derision she faced throughout her life were not only misplaced, but cruel. The sadness of Trelawney's character is also tied to the nature of her prophecies. The first prophecy, which foretells Harry's defeat of Voldemort, is, at its core, a prophecy of hope. Yet it is so burdened by the tragedy that accompanies it, the death of Lily and James Potter, the danger that Harry faces, that it seems at times like a curse rather than a blessing. The second prophecy, which foretells Voldemort's return, is similarly laden with despair. Trelawney is not merely a witness to these events, she is burdened by the knowledge of them, trapped in a cycle of foresight that brings her no joy or fulfillment. Her prophecies, like her life, are filled with a sense of inevitability, as though she is doomed to see the dark truths that no one else can. This duality of Trelawney's character, the seemingly comical, eccentric seer who is, in fact, a deeply isolated and misunderstood individual, is what makes her one of the most fascinating and tragic figures in Harry Potter. As a young reader, one may laugh at her absurd predictions and wonder how such an unremarkable figure could play a pivotal role in the defeat of Voldemort. But as an adult, one comes to understand that Trelawney is in many ways a mirror of the human condition. She embodies the pain of being misunderstood, the agony of seeing the truth but being powerless to change how it is received by others. Trelawney's journey from being mocked as a fool to being recognized as the seer of monumental events is one of the quiet tragedies of the Harry Potter series. Her character reveals the deep flaws in a society that values only what can be measured and proven, and dismisses those who possess a more intangible, yet no less significant form of wisdom. It is this tension between Trelawney's inner knowing and the external world's rejection of her that speaks to the heart of her tragic existence. She is a woman who sees, yet is blind to the world's response, and in that blindness lies the deep sorrow that shapes her character. Number 26, Muggle-borns, Blood Purity and the Illusion of Equality. In the world of Harry Potter, there is a dark moment that reveals itself only when revisited through the eyes of adulthood, the concept of Muggle-borns as a form of social and racial segregation. As a child reading the books, the term mudblood, an insult used to describe Muggle-born witches and wizards, may seem like a petty, juvenile insult. Yet with time and maturity, it becomes clear that J.K. Rowling's magical world is not as free from prejudice as it might first appear. Underneath the enchanting spells and magical creatures, there lies a harsh reality. The wizarding world is deeply divided by a system of blood purity that mirrors the real-world issues of racial and social discrimination. When Harry Potter first learns of the term mudblood and hears it directed at Hermione Granger, he is confused and outraged, but as a child he does not fully grasp the weight of the insult. To him it seems no different from any other schoolyard taunt. But as readers grow older and understand the darker nuances of the world Rowling has created, the true horror of the term becomes apparent. The insult is not just a simple act of cruelty, it is a reflection of an underlying system that sees some wizards and witches as inherently lesser because of their non-magical heritage. The pure-blood wizarding community, those who trace their magical ancestry through generations of wizards and witches, has always considered itself the pinnacle of magical society. Purebloods like Draco Malfoy and his family are raised with the belief that they are superior to Muggle-borns who are seen as outsiders, undeserving of their place in the magical world. Draco's disdain for Harry, Hermione, and anyone who does not share his pure bloodline is evident from the very beginning. His father, Lucius Malfoy, is a staunch supporter of the Dark Lord, whose ideology is rooted in blood purity and the systematic elimination of those deemed impure. The most painful part of this discrimination is that it is not based on personal ability, intelligence, or merit. A Muggle-born witch or wizard like Hermione Granger can be one of the most talented and capable individuals in the entire school, excelling in every subject and even saving the day on multiple occasions. But none of this matters in the eyes of pure-blood wizards who view her as a mudblood simply because she was born to non-magical parents. The irony of the situation is that Hermione's talents, her intelligence, and her courage are irrelevant in the eyes of those who cling to the archaic notion that blood determines worth. In this world, magical ability is not enough to overcome the prejudice that has been deeply ingrained in the wizarding community. Rowling's portrayal of this issue is not just an exploration of magical society, but a reflection of real-world issues. The world outside the pages of Harry Potter is not without its own history of social segregation, racial discrimination, and the demonization of those considered other. The wizarding world, though filled with the wonders of magic, is not exempt from these issues. In many ways, it is a microcosm of the world we live in, where people are often judged not by their actions or character, but by their race, heritage, or background. The tension between blood status and individual worth is perhaps most poignantly exemplified in the character of Severus Snape. Snape is a man who, despite his deep love for Lily Potter, a Muggle-born, is caught in the web of his own bloodline. He is a half-blood, someone who is neither entirely pure nor fully Muggle. For much of his life, Snape is torn between his desire to prove his worth and the prejudice he faces as someone of impure blood. This internal conflict shapes his actions and decisions throughout the series, making him one of the most complex and tragic characters in the Harry Potter universe. But Snape's story also reveals a fundamental truth. Magical ability, no matter how great, cannot erase the deep-rooted prejudices that exist in society. Even Snape, despite his mastery of dark magic, cannot escape the sting of being considered lesser by pure-blood families. His feelings of inadequacy and his need to prove himself are a direct result of the discrimination he faces due to his blood status. This serves as a reminder that magic, while powerful, cannot protect one from the effects of systemic inequality. The issue of blood purity comes to a head during the Second Wizarding War, when Lord Voldemort's obsession with blood status reaches its peak. Voldemort's Death Eaters, many of whom are pure blood extremists like Bellatrix Lestrange, seek to rid the wizarding world of Muggle-borns, viewing them as inferior and unworthy of magic. The fear and hatred that Voldemort instills in his followers are all grounded in the idea that blood determines value. The horror of Voldemort's reign is not just in his pursuit of power, but in his belief that only those with pure, magical blood have the right to exist in the wizarding world. This vision of a world dominated by blood purity is in stark contrast to the values that Harry Potter and his friends hold dear. Throughout the series, Harry, Hermione, and Ron challenge the idea that blood determines worth. They fight alongside those who are considered inferior by the pure blood elite, including house elves, Muggle-borns, and even some half-bloods. The trio's unwavering support for equality and justice makes them heroes, not because of their magical abilities, but because they refuse to accept a system that judges people based on their heritage. In a world where magic can do almost anything, it is their moral compass, their belief in equality, that makes the difference. Yet, despite their efforts, the battle against prejudice is not easily won. The war against Voldemort and his followers is not just a physical battle, it is a battle of ideologies. The wizarding world is forced to confront its own deeply ingrained prejudices, and it becomes clear that the fight for equality is far from over. Even in the aftermath of Voldemort's defeat, the scars of blood purity remain. The wizarding world does not magically become a place of acceptance and equality simply because Voldemort is gone. The attitudes towards Muggle-borns and others considered lesser still persist, though they are now challenged more openly. The message Rowling conveys through this struggle is clear. No amount of magic can erase the prejudices that people carry in their hearts. While magic can heal wounds and create wonders, it cannot change the way people see one another. The discrimination based on blood status in the wizarding world serves as a reflection of the ways in which prejudice operates in our own world. The book urges readers to question the systems of power and privilege that exist, urging them to recognize the humanity in all people, regardless of their background. In the end, the mudblood insult is more than just a simple word of hatred. It is a symbol of the deep divides that exist within the magical world and it serves as a cautionary reminder that even in a world filled with magic, prejudice and discrimination can thrive. The challenge for Harry, Hermione, and their friends is not just defeating Voldemort, but confronting the attitudes that allow such hatred to exist. The message of the series is not that magic can change the world, but that it is the choices we make, the values we uphold, and the love we show for others that truly have the power to create a better future. The story of Muggleborns and the discrimination they face is one that resonates beyond the pages of Harry Potter. It speaks to the very real issues of racism, classism, and social segregation that persist in the world today. In a society that often claims to be progressive, Rowling's work reminds us that discrimination is not always overt. It can be hidden behind the guise of tradition and heritage, and it takes courage and compassion to challenge it. Number 27, Dementors and Depression, the darkest metaphor of all. In the world of Harry Potter, the Dementors are some of the most chilling creatures to be found. They do not kill with physical force or bite with sharp fangs, but instead they suck the very joy out of their victims, leaving behind an emptiness that feels impossible to overcome. For a child reading the books, they are frightening spectres, their presence inescapable and terrifying. However, as one grows older, a deeper and more profound understanding of these creatures emerges. Dementors are no longer merely frightening. They become a powerful metaphor for a much darker reality, depression. At first glance, Dementors seem to be nothing more than monsters of the wizarding world, terrifying entities that suck away the warmth and light from everything they touch. But as Harry Potter grows older and faces more of life's challenges, he begins to realize that their presence is far more than just a physical threat. It is an embodiment of a far more personal and intimate darkness, depression. This connection becomes clearer when we consider the nature of depression itself, an invisible force that drains the color from life, that robs its victims of their ability to experience joy or to find hope in the midst of despair. The Dementors are not murderers in the traditional sense. They do not kill the body, but they kill the spirit. They leave behind nothing but a hollow shell, a person who feels disconnected from the world around them, unable to reach the light even when it is within reach. Harry, having survived the trauma of his parents' violent deaths and the neglect and abuse that followed in the Dursleys' home, is especially vulnerable to the effects of the Dementors. His past experiences leave him particularly sensitive to the effects of the Dementors' kiss, the complete loss of happiness, the loss of the will to continue fighting. When Harry first encounters the Dementor on the train, in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, he is overwhelmed with a sensation of cold, loneliness, and despair. The memory of his parents' deaths comes rushing back, and he relives the night of their murder with such intensity that he is left breathless, shaking, and utterly broken. He is not just a young wizard facing a magical creature. He is a young man still carrying the weight of his trauma, struggling to hold on to any shred of hope. The Dementors feed off of this, amplifying his darkest memories and pulling him deeper into despair. What makes this encounter particularly poignant is the fact that Harry, though in the midst of all this darkness, is not entirely helpless. The key to fighting the Dementors, as he learns from his teacher, Remus Lupin, is the Patronus charm. The spell, Expecto Patronum, is designed to summon a protective force, a Patronus that can drive the Dementors away. On the surface, the spell seems like a simple magical solution to a magical problem, but as Harry struggles to cast the Patronus successfully, it becomes clear that there is much more at stake. The Patronus is not just a magical creature, it is a reflection of the light within Harry, the memories, the love, and the strength that he has deep inside. It is the manifestation of the very things that the Dementors seek to extinguish: hope, joy, love, and the ability to move forward even in the face of overwhelming darkness. For Harry, the Patronus becomes not just a magical defense, but a metaphor for his own survival. The power of the spell lies not in the words he speaks, but in his ability to focus on the happiest memory he can find, the moment of love, the feeling of connection that he had with his parents before they were taken from him. It is a memory that sustains him, that gives him the strength to keep going when all seems lost. The challenge Harry faces is not in mastering a difficult incantation, it is in summoning the courage to face his darkest memories and use them to fuel his own strength. He must believe in the power of love and hope, even when everything around him is trying to convince him that those things no longer exist. The fact that Harry is able to produce a Patronus at all is a testament to his resilience. It shows that, despite everything he has endured, he still holds on to something precious inside of him. His Patronus is not a creature born out of pure magic. It is born out of the love and memories that continue to guide him, even in his darkest hours. The battle against the Dementors is not a physical one. It is a battle for Harry's own soul, a battle to remind himself that, despite all the suffering he has faced, he still has something worth fighting for. As Harry learns to master the Patronus charm, he begins to understand that the true power lies not in the spell itself, but in his own mind and heart. In one of the most telling moments of the series, Harry casts the Patronus for the first time on the grounds of Hogwarts, facing a group of Dementors threatening him and his friends. The Patronus he conjures is not just a magical animal, it is the embodiment of his will to survive, his refusal to let the darkness consume him. In that moment, Harry demonstrates that no matter how dark the world may seem, the ability to find light, whether in memory, in love, or in belief, can help push back against the overwhelming forces of despair. The spell is not just about defending oneself against a magical creature. It is about finding inner strength and hope, even when it feels as though there is none left. The metaphor of the Dementors as a representation of depression is not limited to Harry alone. Throughout the series, we see other characters who are similarly affected by the presence of the Dementors. For example, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we see that even those who seem outwardly strong, like Cedric Diggory, can be affected by the cold grip of despair. In fact, the effect of the Dementors is universal. They do not discriminate based on age, experience, or strength. They feed on the memories of sorrow and loss, and they strip away the ability to experience joy. This is what makes them such a powerful metaphor for depression, an affliction that does not care who you are, how strong you are, or how much you've been through. Depression can affect anyone, and its effects are often invisible, just like the Dementors themselves. They leave their victims alone in a world that seems devoid of color, of warmth, and of joy. The only way to truly defend against the Dementors, it seems, is to find a reason to keep fighting, to find something, anything that can bring back the light. In Harry's case, this comes in the form of his memories of love, of his parents, and of the bonds he shares with his friends. For others, like Sirius Black or Remus Lupin, it might be the memory of lost loved ones, the hope of redemption, or the belief that there is more to life than the darkness. The magic of the Patronus is not just about pushing away the Dementors, it is about summoning the strength to fight against despair, to resist the overwhelming weight of hopelessness, and to remind oneself that there is still good in the world, even when it is hard to see. In this way, the Dementors and the Patronus charm provide one of the most compelling and deeply human metaphors in the Harry Potter series. They speak to the real, everyday struggles that many face with mental health, particularly depression. They show that sometimes it is not enough to fight the external world. Sometimes the real battle is within, a fight to keep moving forward, to hold on to hope, and to remember that even in the darkest of times there is light to be found. The Patronus is not just a magical shield, it is a symbol of resilience, of the power of love and memory, and of the belief that even when all seems lost, there is always something worth fighting for.